What would you do if a man so powerful, so feared, walked into a restaurant and every waiter refused to serve him? This was the night Clara Bennett's life and Victor Hale's would change forever. The Golden Lantern was no ordinary Manhattan dining hall. Its chandeliers dripped light like captured suns, casting golden halos across linen tables. Politicians had toasted victories here, and titans of Wall Street had signed away empires between its velvet curtains. Every fork polished to a mirror's shine carried the weight of history. And that evening, history seemed to pause. The hush began when the bronze doors opened. Not with the soft chime of the silver bell meant to announce arrivals, but with silence. Victor Hale stepped in. Silver hair at the temple's navy suit so precise, it seemed molded onto his frame, and eyes pale cold blue that scanned the room. Not as a guest, but as a conqueror measuring his prize. He wasn't tall, but his presence filled the hall with something heavier than size. An aura of crushing gravity. His reputation had preceded him a tycoon, infamous for dismantling companies and livelihoods with ruthless efficiency. Tabloids called him merciless. Rivals called him feared. Whispers said he had once been broken by personal tragedy, though no one dared voice it aloud. He didn't acknowledge the hostess who faltered smile, vanishing as though swallowed by frost. He strode through the center of the dining hall past murmuring patrons whose conversations died mid-sentence. He stopped at table 12, the most coveted seat in the house. A corner alcove with a sweeping view of Central Park, bathed in chandelier light. Reserved for proposals for anniversaries, for moments remembered across lifetimes. Tonight it was occupied by a young couple, hands and twined faces, glowing with new love. Victor didn't speak to them. He didn't need to. His gaze flicked toward the manager, Robert Callahan, who hurried forward with beads of sweat already glistening. "Mr. Hale, what an unexpected honor. If only we had known, we would have prepared your usual table." Victor's voice cut clean as broken glass. "That is my usual table, and it's occupied. Rectify this." The young man at the table faltered, stuttering, "Sir, we have a reservation." But Victor's eyes turned on him, and the color drained from his face. Words died. The couple gathered their belongings in shame, escorted away toward a table near the kitchens, and the glow of their moment extinguished. The entire room sat frozen forks, suspended glasses, untouched. Victor unbuttoned his jacket, seated himself without a word, and placed a sleek black phone on the linen, as though marking territory. He stared out the window, indifferent to the humiliation he had caused. At table 12 sat not a guest, but a king enthroned, and the rest of the Golden Lantern held its breath. In the narrow corridor behind the Golden Lantern's glittering dining hall, the air was thick with tension. The staff had gathered near the service station, the clink of glasses, and the sizzle of pans from the kitchen, filtering faintly through the swinging doors. Yet none of them moved toward table 12. Toward Enville, manager Robert Callahan's face was pale. He had weathered senators' tantrums and tycoons' eccentricities, but Victor Hale was different. Hale was not a man you served, he was a man you survived. "Someone has to take the table," Callahan said, voice low but urgent. His eyes scanned the small group of veterans he trusted most. "He is a member. We can't afford to insult him." The silence that followed was louder than any protest. Samuel Brooks, the oldest of the crew, rubbed his aching knees. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but memory. "Not me?" he whispered. "Not after last time." He lifted his gaze to Callahan's. "He accused me of trying to poison him because I placed a slice of lemon in his water without being asked. Called it unsolicited citrus contamination. I apologized for an hour. An hour, Robert." His voice cracked under the weight of humiliation. Gregory, miles younger but sharp-eyed, let out a humorless laugh. "That's nothing." He once made me stand there and recite the entire life cycle of the lobster I brought to his table from egg to trap to plate. I did it. And then he sent it back. Said the story was too depressing. Gregory's fists clenched at his sides. I can't do it again. I won't. Thomas Avery, the sommelier, polished the same glass over and over, his knuckles white. His knowledge of vintages was legendary in Manhattan. Yet, even he bore scars. He ordered a bottle of Bordeaux, 1982. $18,000. I decanted it, poured carefully. He sniffed, sipped, and told me to pour it down the drain. His voice shook despite his effort to sound calm. Said the bouquet was presumptuous. My hands shook for a week. Callahan looked at each of them, desperation bleeding through his stern composure. You all know what he means to this restaurant. His money, his connections. Samuel cut him off, voice low but steady. And what does he cost us, Pride? Dignity. Every time we serve him, we leave smaller than we came. Gregory nodded. I've got a mortgage due. I need tips. But not enough to sell my soul. I'm busy with inventory in the cellar. Thomas muttered, already edging toward the stairs. The silence that followed was not laziness. It was rebellion. Not shouted, not declared, but carried in the tight lines of their mouths, the refusal in their eyes. These were men who had served presidents, kings, movie stars. But they would not serve Victor Hale. Callahan's jaw tightened. He felt the weight of the mutiny pressing down on him. The Golden Lantern prided itself on flawless service. Yet here they stood, his best team, paralyzed, not by incompetence, but by survival instinct. Through the thin walls, the dining hall hummed with the nervous energy of guests pretending not to stare at the silver-haired figure sitting alone. Victor Hale didn't call for anyone. He didn't need to. His presence was command enough. Minutes ticked by like hours. The rebellion was silent, but the danger was deafening. Callahan's heart pounded. He knew what it meant to leave Victor Hale unattended. The man destroyed reputations the way other men flicked lint from a sleeve. And right now, the Golden Lantern itself was on the line. Still, none of the veterans moved. Callahan pressed his palms against the countertop, feeling the sweat on his skin. For the first time in years, the well-oiled machine of the Golden Lantern had jammed not from lack of skill, but from one man's impossible shadow. And out in the dining hall, the lion waited. Clara Bennett had perfected invisibility. At 24, she glided through the Golden Lantern unnoticed trays, balanced, smile polite, but fleeting. To be unseen was to be safe. But at home, she couldn't hide from the truth. Her mother's arthritis had worsened so severely that some mornings she couldn't lift herself from bed. The medical bills stacked like bricks around them. Clara's dream, her literature degree at Columbia, felt like a relic from another life. She had sold her textbooks just to make rent. From her quiet corner by the pastry kitchen, she had watched the humiliation unfold. The couple pushed aside. The rebellion backstage. The predator patient at table 12. Her pulse hammered. Every fiber of her body urged her to stay invisible. But another voice, colder, sharper, began to calculate. Her paycheck barely scratched the surface of her mother's medication. Insurance refused coverage. The numbers didn't add up, unless she took a risk. The kind of risk no one else would touch. Victor Hale was not a man. He was a chasm. One wrong move, and she'd be devoured. But perhaps if she somehow survived him, he might leave a tip that could change everything. Or he might have her fired in an instant. Both were possible, both terrifying. Her mind darted back to the last phone call from the hospital. We're sorry, Ms. Bennett, the new medication isn't approved. Out of pocket, it's $600 a month. Clara remembered sitting on the cold kitchen floor holding the phone, staring at her mother's empty pill bottles. $600, an impossible wall she could never scale with her current wages. She thought of her mother's tired smile, of the roses her mother once tended now wilted on a balcony. She thought of the degree she still dreamed of. She thought of all the nights she had whispered to herself, "Hold on. Something has to change." In the hush of the golden lantern, she realized this was the chance. A terrible chance, but the only one. She stepped forward. "I'll take the table," Clara said. The words landed like a crack of thunder. The other waiters turned faces, pale disbelief etched into every line. Samuel's lips parted as though he wanted to call her back. Gregory's eyes flashed pity, maybe admiration. Callahan turned color draining from his cheeks. "You, Clara, do you have any idea? One wrong step, one wrong fork, and you're gone. Not just the table. The restaurant." His voice cracked. "This isn't bravery. It's suicide." Clara straightened her spine, though inside her stomach knotted tighter. "But someone has to serve him. Better me than no one." Samuel's weathered voice pleaded, "You don't have to do this. The man is poison." Clara forced a faint smile. "So is my mother's prescription." For a long moment, the kitchen was silent, except for the hiss of a pan and the hum of refrigeration. The rebellion had been broken not by fear, but by one young waitress choosing desperation over safety. She smoothed her apron, picked up the silver pitcher, checked twice for any rogue lemon slice, and walked toward the lion's den. The dining room watched her every step, some with pity, some with awe. Clara's feet felt impossibly heavy, yet carried her forward. The lamb had chosen the lion. The dining room held its breath as Clara approached table 12. Victor Hale sat motionless, a granite figure framed by the golden glow of chandeliers. He didn't acknowledge her until she set the water pitcher carefully on the tray stand, hands steady, though her pulse thundered. Finally, he turned. His pale eyes, colder than the marble columns around us, pinned her in place. Silence stretched like wire pulled too tight. "Good evening," Sir Clara said, voice soft but clear. "My name is Clara, and I'll be serving you tonight." He studied her as though measuring not just a waitress, but the sum of her worth. Then, in a tone sharp as a blade, "I don't care for your specials. Bring me a poached egg." Clara blinked. "A poached egg, sir?" "Yes," he said, leaning back. "Soft, but not runny. The yolk golden like a sunset, not pale, not hard. The toast brioche, cut into a perfect 2-inch square. Toasted to the shade of old gold. Not yellow, not brown. Old gold. Butter brushed, not spread. Unsalted. The room seemed to shrink around her as he continued. "It is to be served on a plain white plate. No garnish, no parsley, no pepper, no oil. If I see so much as a fleck of green, it goes back. 15 minutes. Do you understand?" Her throat was dry. "Yes, sir." He gave the smallest nod, permission or dismissal she couldn't tell. Clara retreated into the kitchen, every eye of staff trailing her. She repeated the order in her head like scripture's sunset yolk, old gold toast, butter brushed, plain white plate, no garnish, 15 minutes. Chef Antoine slammed his cleaver down when he heard. "An egg. He wants poetry from poultry. Old gold. Does he think I keep a painter's palette?" His French accent thickened as he cursed. "Un poème ridicule." The line cooks chuckled nervously, but fell silent when they saw Clara's face. She wasn't amused. She was terrified. "Please," she whispered. "He's timing me." Antoine looked at her, saw the desperation in her eyes, and sighed. "Fine. I will give him his ode." He barked orders. Water boiled. Brioche was sliced. Time became the enemy, each second loud as a drum. Clara hovered, wiping her damp palms on her apron, checking the wall clock every few breaths. 10 minutes gone. Antoine muttered under his breath, fishing the egg from simmering water with surgeon's precision. He plated it, gleaming white yolk trembling within, perched on a square of toast, toasted to burnished perfection. The plate was blindingly plain. He slid it to her. "Tell him it took 14 minutes. Perfection cannot be rushed." Clara carried the plate like a crown jewel. Every step across the carpet was a battle against shaking hands. Patrons watched forks paused mid-air. To them, she was a lamb walking toward a predator. At the table, she set it down gently. The egg sat alone on a wide porcelain plate, small yet commanding. Victor's eyes narrowed. He picked up his fork, tapped the egg once. It wobbled firm, delicate. He sliced. The white parted clean and golden yolk spilled across toast in a slow, gleaming river. A perfect sunset. Clara stopped breathing. He raised a bite to his mouth, chewed slowly. No flicker of expression. Another bite. A third. Finally, he dabbed his lips with a napkin. "The toast," he said at last, voice flat. It was acceptable. Clara's knees nearly gave way. Acceptable. From Victor Hale, that was praise of the highest order. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, sir. Would you like anything else?" "Just the bill," he replied, already turning his gaze back to the window, as if the entire ordeal had been nothing more than another ritual in a long chain of grief. But for Clara, it was survival, and perhaps the beginning of something she could not yet name. Victor left the golden lantern with the same silence he had carried in. Only a crisp $100 bill and a plain white card remained in the leather folio. Central Park. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Don't be late. Clara held the card between trembling fingers. Her co-workers crowded close. Samuel muttered, "A trap." Gregory shook his head. "A game." Callahan only whispered, "You're finished if you go." That night, sleep never came. Clara lay awake in her small apartment, the card on her nightstand like a ticking clock. Her mother stirred in the next room, groaning softly from aching joints. Clara stared at the cracked ceiling paint and wondered, was this summons a punishment, an opportunity, or just another cruel test? By afternoon, the city was alive with autumn. The sidewalks glistened from a morning shower, and the air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts. Clara's boots crunched over fallen leaves as she walked the winding paths of Central Park. She rehearsed excuses in her mind. If it's an insult, I'll walk away. If it's danger, I'll run. But still her feet carried her toward the pond. There he was. Victor Hale, no navy suit, no boardroom armor. Just a dark sweater trousers, plain silver hair catching the weak sunlight. He sat on a wooden bench, tearing pieces of bread, tossing them to ducks that squabbled noisily. The image was so ordinary, it unsettled her. "You came," he said without looking. His voice was lower, softer, but carried the same gravity. Clara stood a cautious distance, unsure whether to sit. He gestured to the empty space beside him. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the bench. Silence stretched. The city's roar felt distant here, muffled by wind and quacking ducks. Victor watched the water as though searching for something lost beneath its ripples. Finally, Clara asked, "Why the egg?" For the first time, his shoulders sagged, his eyes usually so sharp dimmed with memory. "It was Margaret's favorite," he said. "My wife." She said the simplest things were the hardest to get right. A poached egg, a cup of coffee, a quiet morning. His voice faltered. 5 years ago. Cancer. One day she was laughing at the way I burned toast. The next... He broke off, pressing his lips tight. Clara's breath caught. The impossible standards, the cruelty, the test, it all made sense. He wasn't tormenting the staff for amusement. He was raging at the universe for failing to give him back the perfection he had lost. "She used to sit here," he murmured, gesturing to the bench. "We'd buy coffee from that cart, bring our own eggs wrapped in napkins. She called them her little suns on clouds. His face, hard as stone in the restaurant, softened into something unbearably human. Grief carved deep. Clara swallowed. My mother is sick. Advanced arthritis. Some days she can't even stand. She used to garden roses everywhere. Now she only stares at empty pots. Her voice cracked. Sometimes the unfairness makes me so angry, I want to scream at strangers. But I don't. Victor turned toward her. For the first time, his eyes weren't cold. They were haunted. And in that moment, Waitress and Billionaire were stripped of titles. Two wounded souls sat side by side, their silence no longer hostile, but shared. Victor listened, unmoving. Then he reached into his coat and drew out a slim notebook. He flipped it open, extended it with a pen. The medication. Write it. Clara recoiled. Mr. Hale, I can't. You're not asking, he interrupted. I am offering. Write it. His voice was firm, but not cruel. More like a man accustomed to solving problems with decisive strokes. Hands trembling, Clara wrote the name of the prescription and her doctor. The act felt surreal, like signing a contract with fate. Victor folded the page, slipped it into his pocket. It will be covered. 2 days later, the pharmacy called. Your mother's medication has been approved indefinitely. Clara nearly dropped the phone. The cost that had hung over them like a guillotine was gone. The following week, another letter arrived, an educational grant. The Hale Foundation would cover Clara's return to Columbia University. She sat at her kitchen table, letter in hand, tears burning her eyes. When Victor returned to the Golden Lantern, the staff braced for another storm. But the storm never came. He arrived on time, waited politely at the hostess stand. Is Clara working tonight? He asked. Seated at a modest table, he ordered the bison steak medium rare and a glass of Cabernet. No cruel tests, no impossible demands. When Thomas poured the wine, Victor nodded with quiet thanks. When Samuel delivered bread, Victor said softly, appreciated. Callahan, watching from the sidelines, was stunned. The tyrant was gone. In his place was a man relearning civility. And it rippled outward. The staff no longer moved in fear, but in calm respect. Even Callahan began treating junior staff with more dignity, as if Clara's bravery had cracked something open in all of them. Weeks passed. Victor came often, each time a little gentler, a little warmer. He spoke with Clara about books. He asked Gregory about his house search. He even tipped double, not to flaunt wealth, but as a gesture of gratitude. The man who once seemed carved from ice was melting slowly in the light of ordinary kindness. 2 weeks later, Clara hung up her apron for the last time. Her co-workers gathered backstage, the air warm with laughter and tears. Samuel handed her a set of leather-bound classics. For the future scholar, he said, voice thick. Gregory clapped her shoulder. Thomas raised a glass of wine. Even Callahan, awkward but sincere, thanked her for courage that had changed the restaurant itself. Clara hugged them each, the books pressed to her chest. You taught me more than you know, she whispered. At Columbia, the transformation was just as profound. No longer crushed by financial fear, Clara immersed herself in literature, her small dorm desk, piled high with poetry and novels. In the evenings, she visited her mother, who now walked the balcony to tend roses. Red blooms spilled from pots, their scent sweet as memory. Clara would sit with her, reading aloud, under the glow of string lights. One crisp afternoon, a package arrived. Heavy, wrapped in brown paper. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a porcelain egg plain, white gleaming. Beside it lay a card in sharp black ink for the woman who understood the meaning of a simple egg. VH. Clara traced the smooth surface, tears pricking her eyes. It wasn't wealth he had given her, not really. It was proof that one act of empathy, even born of desperation, could ripple outward, changing lives in ways unimaginable. She placed the egg on her desk. Sunlight streamed through the window, making it glow. In that glow, she saw not only her own journey, but his, from feared tyrant to grieving man, from bitterness to quiet redemption. And she understood sometimes the cruelest masks hide the deepest wounds. Sometimes the smallest acts, a poured glass of water, a poached egg, can shift the course of entire lives. She placed the egg on her desk. Sunlight streamed through the window, making it glow. In that glow, she saw not only her own journey, but his, from feared tyrant to grieving man, from bitterness to quiet redemption. And she understood sometimes the cruelest masks hide the deepest wounds. Sometimes the smallest acts, a poured glass of water, a poached egg, can shift the course of entire lives. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need the reminder. Tell me in the comments, has a small act of kindness ever changed your life? And if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and humanity, I'd be honored if you subscribe to this channel. Because stories like Clara's and Victor's remind us that no matter how dark life feels, we are never truly alone.